Coach never fails to amuse me, and that is definitely the case with Sam's women. He is not the main character in this one. Coach is very rarely our main character. It does happen, but with Sam's women, that's definitely not the case. But I just wanted to start by saying I absolutely love Nicholas Colasanto's performance in this. I thought he was absolutely brilliant. Same across the board, of course. Episode 2 of the first season, Sam's Women, was released in 1982, directed by the amazing James Burrows, written, of course, by Glenn Charles, Les Charles, and James Burrows. And we have a main storyline here. Carla, I should point out, Carla doesn't really have much of a narrative here. Norm, not so much, though we do get to say Norm, and I think for the first time, yes, it would have been the first time, we get to hear Diane saying Norman, because if you're a Cheers fan and you've seen the show, you'll be aware that everybody goes Norm, and then just at the end you always hear Diane going Norman. So that happened for the first time, which amuses me to no end every time that it happens. But in this episode, Sam is trying to prove to Diane that he can date clever women, because Brandee, with 2 E's, comes into the bar. Sam is very interested, and Diane kind of begins to make fun of him for dating women who are less than intelligent, whose cup sizes are bigger than their IQ. I know that doesn't make sense because cup sizes are not measured in numbers, but you get what I'm trying to say. And Sam takes a bit of offense to this, so he goes out of his way to prove Diane wrong. But there are pitfalls. There are pitfalls with this. We do get to see that bit of spark between Sam and Diane. Mainly from Diane, interestingly. I have watched all of Cheers, of course, and looking back, before I rewatched this, I couldn't quite remember whether it was Sam or Diane who showed the first sign of being interested in the other person. I've come to the conclusion that it was Diane. During the moment when Sam was explaining how her eyes were the best colour that he had ever seen, and he tells it much more beautifully than I did, and she just for that moment becomes mesmerised. And that's the first time we kind of get to see that Diane could potentially end up liking Sam. And I think that that's a really, really important moment, actually. And that episode does give us this moment. You know, why does Diane care so much about who Sam goes out with? Why should it bother her that Sam, whom she doesn't really claim to like, why should it bother her that he dates people who she thinks are beneath him? She thinks and says to him in the episode that she thinks he could do better. He could date more intellectual women, women who have got more going for them. Why would she care if she didn't like Sam? Of course she wouldn't admit that. Certainly not yet. But I think we have some really great character development. Obviously, the majority of the episode is about Sam and Diane. We get a bit of Coach, a bit of Carla, a bit of Norm. Did we get any Cliff? I think John Ratzenberger was in it very fleetingly, but I don't believe he was in it very much at all, which is a bit unusual. But I like this episode as a second episode. It's a good way. You know, we're still spending the entire episode in the bar, in the pub, of course. But it's a good way for us to kind of learn who is leading the narrative at the moment, which is, of course, Sam and Diane at this point. And it kind of sets us up for what the narrative throughout the rest of the season will entail. But I still think Coach gave a standout performance, particularly when oh goodness, what was his name? The guy came in and asked for the old manager, the old bar owner. And Coach's reaction to that was brilliant. Gus, that was his name, the old bar owner. And just the way Coach talked about Gus and the way he tried to help the guy's problems, I loved it. I adored his performance. And, you know, I think this is... No, I can't... I was going to say what happens with this particular character after a few seasons and the involvement of Woody and what that led the show to be like. But I can't really discuss that without giving spoilers. But I'll just say very loosely that what happens with this character and then Woody made the show go in potentially a different direction. I wonder what would have happened if that hadn't been the case. It's just curiosity. But Sam's Women, I really like. You know, I love Ted Danson. I think he's absolutely fantastic. His performance in this is great. Shelley Long's performance was brilliant. You know, Diane is such... On the surface, Diane seems really... I don't want to say basic, because that's kind of giving the wrong impression. But she seems very one-track minded. But you get little glimmers of how complex she is as an individual here. And I really like that. And also Shelley Long laughing on cue. Absolutely fantastic. Sans Women as the second episode of Cheers. I cannot fault it at all.